Good morning. It's 27th of February, 6:10 a.m. 27th of February 2013, 6:10 a.m. on Pacific Coast time, west coast of North America. We may indeed have earthquakes today. So far we haven't had a real large one in the last 3 days. The error rate on our immediacy data is 3 days either direction for a 6-day range. And the most likely position of the error is 3 days. It's a little bell curve thing. So, for instance, it's really frequent to have a 3-day error, less frequent to have 2 days error, and less frequent to have 1-day error off of the immediacy data. And usually with the 1-day error stuff, by the time we write it up or discuss it, it's happened already, so we never really bring it out. Anyway, so a bunch of interesting things recently. Let's start off with I guess let's start off with chemtrails. And no, let's start off with the little expedition I had the other day. Had to go out and about in town and buy some supplies for my boat building. In the process, I went over to a local fast food place and picked up a single item that they happen to sell. I don't really want to discuss where it was. Simply, it's not really a fast food place. It's a local venue in which it's a cafe, but they also sell food items there. Sort of a deli kind of a thing. Anyway, and so I went and picked up this one item that I wanted to buy, and while I was there, behind me, separated by a half a wall about say height of your ribs or something, so there's a booth on the other side of it. But behind me were some of our local state patrol officers. And these state patrol officers, I think there were five of them. The booth was full. These are big guys. There was a guy sitting in a chair there. Anyway, they they were discussing the recent resistance rally here in Olympia, Washington, which is the capital of Washington state, unlike everybody's assumption that Seattle is somehow the capital. But there was a rally here, a resistance against gun control. And the state patrol guys, like I say, they were discussing this and joking and laughing. One of the, I didn't catch much, just was there for a few minutes, but the few minutes I was there was very, very telling, because one of the guys was discussing his position as a bodyguard for a local politico, and how the local politicos were basically freaked. They had not expected that level of response. And they know how difficult it is to get any kind of a political action to occur, especially with the engineered lethargy and apathy these days. And so to see such a strong response has these guys very scared. I doubt seriously that there's, in Washington State anyway, that there will be any ability by the federal government to impose any level of control of guns of any sort, weapons of any sort. Just the outpouring was just so damaging to the preconceived notions that the politicos had, that it was basically a slap upside the head and a real reality shock. So that was just kind of funny. I happened to be there purchasing this, and these guys were having breakfast. And then I go about my business, and anyway, I was thinking about that later in the day. But let's start here with chemtrails, because there's the chemtrail flu going around. Note, I do not think that the chemtrail flu and the discussions about this meet the linguistics that we're seeing for this other flu episode or other sickness episode that'll strike in late winter and occupy a lot of our mental activity through the transition from late winter into spring, which basically says the month of March. Now, this was a discussion we'd had based on data that's been coming out in January and early February, and I brought it up in the immediacy data reports, was a projection for a resurgence of an illness. I hesitate to call it a flu, because so many illnesses are called a flu, and I'm not sure that that's the case. We have flu as a word in our data set, but of course that's the word people are going to use, even if it's not influenza, and people call gastrointestinal disease, they'll call it stomach flu, and it's indeed not an influenza at all. So I really hesitate to characterize the disease that way. It may be a resurgence of one of these influenzas. I just don't know. But it's going to be really deadly and very nasty and very virulent, and will get a lot of our attention, as I say, through the month of March. Now, so far, the linguistic sets for chemtrails and for this projected illness set are divergent. They do not really have much in common other than the common linguistics around the idea of disease. So I really don't think that chemtrail flu, as nasty as it is this other disease state that we've got coming for us. Now, along the chemtrail flu line, this morning I read this article which purports to be from an inside scientist saying that chemtrails are being used in conjunction with the flu vaccines to eliminate all of the population of North America, and then they're going to truck in 200,000 people to take care of the North American continent as a big park for the elite to come and play in. Now, okay, I don't doubt about the goal. I don't doubt, this is the funny part, I don't doubt that the elite truly want to get rid of all the people in North America. We're a royal for them, pain in the ass, okay? So we're just atypical. We're a linchpin that prevents the whole crumbling of the mountain their direction. They don't want us to exist. For many different reasons, the mindset, etc., and we occupy a really neat piece of real estate that they want to do some things with. So the goal, I truly understand. Agenda 21, the rewilding of America, the biospheres, the national parks being taken over by the UN, sealing off vast areas of the country from people. It's happened here in our state. Washington State is owned in a large sense by the federal government. There's vast tracts of land that the government claims that the federal government, the crime syndicate that operates out of the other Washington back on the East Coast, that's protected by all of the people that live around it, those people claim to own huge amounts of this state that I live in, this republic. And there's at some point there's going to be a huge amount of contention over who actually owns what. But at this point it doesn't exist because everybody here in the political sense kowtows to the federal government. And so they say, yes, the federal government owns this. And they've basically taken what used to be generally accepted public access areas and eliminated them from public access. And they did it in some really sneaky ways because I've run across these things locally. And that is that they will actually go and to the trouble of altering roads and paths and disguising old roads and paths with planting to plantings of quasi-local brush. That's where they give themselves away, as they buy a lot of landscape plants that don't survive in the wild, thinking that they'll be able to buy hothouse salal and put it out in the wild to redo a road, and it just doesn't work. The salal dies off too rapidly, and the whole road becomes basically a giant marker of other plants that are opportunistically replacing it and coming in for the light. And so it really stands out. And you can say, yeah, that's where the old road was, and look, they had all this planting here last year and it's died off, and this is the result. But basically they've done that. There's an area here of about 7,000 miles of roads in a small wilderness area in my county. And the local guys here, we all used to go there. I used to go mushroom hunting there. It was a great place for hunting wild turkey, so you'd never want to go hunting mushrooms during wild turkey hunting season. Although really you're sort of safe. They're usually looking up to shoot them in trees because that's where they like to hang out. And the mushroom guys are looking on the ground. But also concurrently, there were also a lot of, usually a lot of yellow jackets and hornets and stuff during that time, and I didn't like going out. But that whole area now is gone because there were 3 roads that provided access. There were gravel roads. They were old logging roads. You had to have a decent 4-wheel drive to get up into the higher elevations, but you could have, a regular car or truck would have done quite well in the lower, and you can't get there now. The roads simply have been paved around, and their property has been shifted. The county has done some grants with the feds, and now there's houses being developed in areas that used to allow access to these 7,000 miles of intertwining trails and roads. And it's like this all over the state. A friend of mine who lives near the Forks side of the Olympic Mountain says the same thing is occurring over there in an area that used to be public access in the Hoh River Valley, which is a marvelous temperate rainforest. If you're ever up in this area and you want to see something really spectacular, you need to go see the Hoh River Valley in the appropriate season. I wouldn't do to see it in winter, but in spring or in summer, it's incredible, especially if you can get somebody to take you way up in the valley that knows the area and the river. Because temperate rainforests are really spectacular. They're unlike our tropical rainforests in many regards, and you'll see, and unlike the warmer areas, but still you'll see things like cold level or cold hardy lichens and mosses that may have 100-foot trails or 100-foot vines, so to speak. And since the mosses and lichens are not ropey like a vine, it's really a weird effect. I mean, it's very difficult to describe. Quite spooky, and probably lends credence to the idea that, that's why Sasquatch likes hanging out there, and that's probably why all the vampires chose Forks. That and the fact that there's never any sunlight. Anyway, so the chemtrail article. I think there's a chemtrail article. It purports to be written by a scientist. It purports to offer a view in which the chemtrails are being used in conjunction with the influenza vaccines to eliminate the populace of the United States, as part of the rewilding Agenda 21, going to turn the United States into a big park for the elite. Again, I don't doubt the goal, but I doubt the statements that are made in that article for a number of different reasons. It does not pass the smell test. If this guy could be a legitimate person, could be a scientist, and that could be their conclusion, but again, I don't buy that either. The language does not suggest that. The language actually suggests this was a mill work, cranked out in a disinformation mill. Just the way that the intro is put together and how the whole thing is structured. You'll usually see some of these telltale marks on these Disinfo pieces is that they set you up. They try and set you up immediately, rather than come out as a crazy guy just ranting and railing, oh my God, I've discovered the secret, here it is. They're trying to kill us with these things, and make all these declarative statements the way you might if you actually had discovered information like this and you want to get it out. Rather, you'll find that the millwork, the Disinfo pieces, set you up by saying they describe who they are and why they have to remain anonymous, and all these conditions that basically are extraneous to the central point that they're trying to get across. And it's it's part of the con. It's part of the setup. This doesn't pass the smell test either, in the sense that the conclusions that were found in the article I don't buy, even if the fellow were to be not disingenuous and was actually legitimate in their, legitimately a government compartmentalized scientist who had come to this conclusion. I think his conclusion is erroneous simply because it's ineffective, and I've worked for small government. And big government is just small government made more. It's not really larger, there's just more of it is all, and it's as chaotic as that. I lived in a federal government system for the first 17 years of my life, which is the U.S. military, so I saw it in a way that, since I was an observant child, that allowed me to understand how organizations work at that level. And then going to work later as an adult for local government here in various little stints has given me an appreciation for just how basically fucked up it all is. And so the statement in the scientist's article there that chemtrails are being used to, predispose our lungs to bind to particular influenza, I think is quite garbage. If that were the case, you would only need 1 year of spraying at most. And I know the chemtrail spraying has been going on since at least 1996, when I became aware of it, likely earlier. And so we've seen almost a whole generation of spraying of chemtrails. And so that is not necessary in a depopulation effort. If you were going to do that with a disease, for one thing, one component of this is the longer you go on with a conspiracy, the more the likelihood of discovery and leaks rises exponentially with the amount of time involved. So the best conspiracies are what we call, robberies where 4 or 5 people get together and they plan a heist and they do it. That's a conspiracy. They do it quick, they get it done, and look how often they end up with those conspiracies leaking out. Imagine conspiracies as we've seen with hundreds of millions of people involved, in the forms of wars and all this other kind of crap over time. I mean, the hundreds of millions of people. And of course you find that, as soon as you reach a certain threshold in conspiracies, it starts leaking out. And that's why the government, the master of conspiracies and criminal double dealing, has sections within their operation that are designed to deal with the leaking of the information. And so they would write articles like this supposed one from the scientist who's anonymous, blah, blah, blah. And they would put these articles out there to predispose your mind to follow certain trails when you come across certain information. You will notice one big thing about this article if you go and read it. It's being touted on a number of the conspiracy sites now. And if you go and read it, you'll know it does one thing there. Go through and read the article. You'll find out that it starts off talking about chemtrails and the chemtrail flu and all of this kind of stuff and the secrets being discovered, and then very rapidly drops that as a subject and redirects you back to influenza vaccines and spends all the time talking about the vaccines and very little time about the chemtrails at all. Barely mentioned. No mention of the mechanisms involved or any of this. But so it's a distraction and a disinfo piece in the sense that it wants to redirect your attention from chemtrails over to flu vaccines. And why this is the case, I don't know. But that is the goal, because they don't really discuss in that article how the chemtrails as a mechanism are being used. There's no discussion of the chemtrails at all, really. And yet it purports to be an article about the linkage between chemtrails and the ultimate plot of depopulation and how they want to do it to the U.S. There's also no real discussion about how chemtrails are a planet-wide phenomena. They are not limited to the United States. So there's all kinds of stuff left out that really points to the mind that wrote this being ignorant or deliberately occulting of information, occluding the point of the article, and it's a redirect. So in my mind, it's a disinfo piece put out for some specific reason, likely to get you to not think about chemtrails in specific ways. Why that should be, I don't know. Their goals on this are kind of interesting to speculate on, but very difficult to arrive at any kind of a conclusion. Now, the chemtrail flu itself, I think, actually is a valid phenomenon. It certainly exists as a condition. I don't think that the chemtrail flu is the introduction of a viral or a bacterial condition. There may be viral or bacterial opportunistic infections that arise as a result of the condition that comes from the chemtrails. And that condition basically is stress of the lungs from having to breathe and process your oxygen through all of the small particulates that are rolling through our space in these huge clouds. Now, you have to understand that the chemtrails, when they spray them up there that day, float down over the course of, say, the next 17, 18 hours. So I've noticed that I would see heavy spraying throughout the morning, and then that night, especially in spring when the weather conditions were just right, I could go on out with my night vision goggles, and you could see the chemtrail fog, this electro-smoggy fog stuff that is not visible with the naked eye. You could see it under specific light conditions at a specific time, and it's usually around 8:30 through 9 in spring, early spring. And you would see these clouds that would be easily 50, 60 feet high, and they were like waves. And you would see the wind disturb this floating mass that you're breathing. You have to understand that as you look at it, it's all around you. It's everywhere. And you can see that it's also sort of trailing down from the chemtrails. If you happen to catch it with the light from the sun, as the Earth's rotating away from the sun, and you see this sort of angle issue, you can actually see the light creep down to a certain extent, and you see the stuff coming down out of the chemtrails. And it forms this mass that we're all breathing. And so this chemtrail flu, I think, in my opinion anyway, is more of a condition that exists as opposed to the introduction of a disease state by an organism. Now, it is true we are all in a dis-ease from having to breathe through this crap. And who knows what it's actually doing internally to us. There's just no way of telling. Very sophisticated if its goal was to simply get us to succumb to the flu. As a cost-effective method, I mean, government's not particularly cost-effective. Their goal is, one of their goals is to waste as much money as possible for the benefit of the people that support government. However, government in the way of big projects like the chemtrail sort of thing, they don't use giant projects like that to swat flies. They don't develop missiles to swat flies. So because they have to sell these ideas all the way up the chain of command, and the chain of command always has certain cost considerations. No matter how nefarious the plot is, they have to raise the money to support it. So even if they know they've got to spend bazillions of dollars with chemtrails, they're not going to spend the bazillions of dollars that way just to get a better influenza attack on us. It'd be much easier, much more cost effective to simply have the a small fraction of that money put into the bacteria or viral influenza agents themselves to make them that much better. And so the whole scheme and the plan and all of this that the guy writes about, I think, is spurious, and I do not think that it's a valid argument about what chemtrails are out there for. I'm not saying I know what chemtrails are out there for, but I do know that we're breathing through them. This brings up the issue. This is why I recommended, if you have the tolerance for it and so on, astragalus root. Olagus root. It's a powder, and it's an herb, and you can take it as a tonic. You can take it for long periods of time, but it's very harsh on the system, and you cough a lot. I do take it myself every 2 or 3 or 4 days based on how much exposure I'm getting out in the boat shed and how much chemtrail spraying is going on. I have noticed the chemtrail flu is affecting all kinds of people around me, even those that are in denial about the chemtrails themselves. And there's been an uptick in the amount of disease and degraded individuals, degraded health of individuals in our local environment. Not to say that this is an effective way to depopulate. So again, I just don't buy the guy's argument that way. But there certainly are debilitating effects from the chemtrails. Now, the approach of cleaning your lungs, I also do misogi, which is purification breaths here every morning. And so frequently you'll hear me coughing and snorting and, blowing my nose and running around with wheezing and all of this kind of stuff during my immediacy data intelligence reports, because I have to get up very early in the morning to do those because of just the nature of the processing. And it relates to the fact that I do these purifications, and there's a lot of chemtrail crud to cough up, but it does work. You can aid your lungs significantly in this process. And basically my goal here is to stay as healthy as I can, as long as I can, and hopefully get to the point where I can be one of the people that will help gut that last banker, haul his intestines out, and use it to strangle the last pope. I can't say that anymore because it looks like we're looking at him, but strangle the last politician, and as we then use their bones to beat to death the people that own the politicians. I just want to see what's going on, and there's a lot of people that have big debts that are owing, and karma may need some help. So I just want to live long enough to get through that and see what's going to pop out on the other side, because we're in a situation where this cannot continue for that much longer. The daily cost of chemtrails is sapping the global economy. It's affecting the breakaway civilization, probably is inherently interlocked with the breakaway civilization. There may indeed be space alien components to this, in the sense that this electro smog may interfere with or allow the government in some way to do battle with these other frequency beings that are shading over through here, that kind of thing. So who really knows? I do know that you've got to get through it, though, and so you have to recognize that it's an ongoing condition, and deal with it as a realistic adult. And that's the same as all of the other evils of our society. The degradation of the food body, the Monsantoism, the global push towards genetically modified everything for some damn reason. I don't know why they're doing that. All of these things have to be looked at as inimical to our lives, and we have to look at them realistically and deal with them. So in my way of thinking as a martial artist, you start with yourself and make yourself as fit as possible for the battles you've got to undertake. And we got a lot of battles ahead of us, a lot of challenges. And so we need to be very, very, very fit. Unfortunately, some of the things they're doing are attempting to make us unfit. And I would hate being a kid these days. A child these days not being taught how to strengthen their mind to overcome the blandishments of advertisements and select their own diet. They're doomed. They're doomed to, obesity, short lifespans, and so on. So, like I say, I would hate to be a kid. I at least came from a generation where there was some level of intention on training your mind, and without that you don't have anything. You're just subjected to those that have willpower and that are running the system. A couple of things about the staying fit and all of that, especially as old people here, a lot of old farts running around like myself. Turns out that when you get into exercise, you'll discover a real key factor here has to do with the lymph system, and how the lymph system, there's twice as much fluid in general as you have in the blood system. But the lymph system in the human body has no heart to pump it. It relies entirely on the pumping action that's generated by your muscles contracting in order to move the lymph fluid through its system. The lymph system is intimately connected with the meridian system of the acupuncture fame, as well as intimately connected with the flow of chi or other energy through the chakras. And the lymph system has these little valves in it that are every so often, and then there's larger valves at these juncture points, just basically like your veins and your arteries, only much more intensely valved, because it relies on a pressure building up and sort of popping the valves to get the lymph to move from one section to the next and cause the whole thing to go. So being sedentary is not good. The longer you sit, the closer you are dying, because you need to get the valves moving in your lymph system. Our bodies were designed for particular kinds of activity. So those people that you see out running miles, the endurance kind of guys, that's not a good way to go. You'll note a lot of these individuals die. They just keel over instantly after exercise one day. Jim Fix, the fellow who popularized in the 60s and 70s running and jogging and basically started all that trend, that's what happened to him. He just was running one day and stopped and fell over dead. It in no way, as near as anybody can tell, really aided his life to be an intense runner if the goal was to, have longevity. But we know from a long history of how humans operate and secrets in the martial arts dojo that the real key to healthful living and longevity and this kind of thing comes down to heart rate variability. And so you see that, you'll see academics go to places like the Hunza valleys and the Villacumbra valleys in South America and all of this kind of longevity sites around the planet, and they'll say, one of the common elements is these people live in these valley areas and they have to walk over the mountains, so they walk a lot. And that's true. You need to get up and walk a lot. The reason you need to get up and walk a lot is that it does pump the lymph system. Pumping the lymph through the system allows your body to detoxify. There's more of the detoxification going on in that system than there ever will be in your blood. So bear in mind your blood is very specific in what it's supposed to do, and the kinds of toxins it handles are also very specific. It's not intended to deal with the general crud that your body is constantly absorbing in our now super polluted world with Fukushimas all over and chemtrails raining down on us and nasty food and the toxins and other stuff from regular pollution, car exhaust, that kind of crap, coal fire plants. All of the pollutants that we're exposed to continuously are amassing in our body, and the system that gets rid of it is the lymph system. And so the blood system rarely handles any of those long chain molecule kind of things that we get exposed to, or the sticky short chain molecules that you find in a lot of the basic acrylic plastics that we're exposed to these days. And then it would include some of the pseudo hormonal chemicals. because those are sticky molecules in how they're thought of. Anyway, in any event, without getting into the detail of the chemistry involved, to get rid of these things, you need to get your lymph system moving. And it's also a key element in weight loss. If you really want to lose weight, the way to get the weight regulated within your body is to get up to the point of exercise that you can actually get the lymph system to move. And this is, curiously, when people talk about the burn in the muscles and that kind of thing. Well, the burn in that initial stage of the muscles exercise, I would say, is it's sort of an okay thing. I don't really go for that. You used to have all of these people say, go for the burn, blah, blah, blah. But from a martial arts perspective, that's not how you exercise. The thing to do is to exercise for heart rate variability. And so you will notice that you go to an Aikido dojo and everybody's sitting seiza, the little Zen style, or maybe cross-legged. And you get some instructions on a particular kind of a move, and you may sit there for 5 minutes as the sensei goes through the details of a particular move. And everybody gets up, and you go through and you do these moves. And it may take you 5 or 6 minutes after you've actually gotten up and started replicating the movement before you get to the point where you're comfortable with it. And then you'll notice that the class as a whole shifts into a slightly higher level of activity for about 5 minutes or so. And then the sensei has everybody sit down. And so basically you're up for around 11 or 12 minutes in movement, and the last couple of minutes have been very intense. The first couple of minutes have been this sort of little gradual warm-up to it. Then you sit down for a bit, and you get another set of instruction and so on. And it's only when you get to the point where you're black belt at the level of upper student, senpai, that the level of intensity increases in duration to where you're doing 15 and 20 minutes at a very intense state. And even then you'll stop and your heart rate is allowed to return to normal. Everybody cools off, so it's sweat cool all the way through the class for an hour and a half. And basically what's going on is you're adjusting your heart rate variability to where your heart can withstand a sudden increase of intensity that lasts for a known limited duration. You're not intending to be an endurance fighter where you're going to stand there and fight for 20 minutes, and that's something else too. If you ever see these action movies and you see somebody up there just slugging it out for all this period of time, it's like, I get tired just watching that stuff. It's really a calorie sucker. It's intense to get up there and fight, and usually all the fights I've been involved in have been over very quickly. You look at it, it seems like it lasts forever while you're involved in it, but when you're done, you see that the whole thing probably lasted a minute. It's really a real time distorting experience. Anyway, though, so losing weight, you can get rid of the weight if you can get your lymph system moving, and you can adjust the heart rate variability that your heart can stand. The problem is in losing weight that you find that a lot of people take the approach of, they get the treadmills and, they say, okay, I'm going to commit to doing a mile or 2 miles a day on the treadmills or whatever, 10-mile runs or any of this. And it never works. They always fade out. And that's because no one can do it. Even really fit people have a hard time maintaining the same pace for a long period of time, and it leads to heart damage when they do so. So it's not a good thing. So that's not the way to lose weight. The way to lose weight is to do many, many, many activities of varying intensity that start at a low level and go up to a high intensity in a short period of time, and then allow your heart to relax. And this strengthens the heart. That's the first muscle you should always strengthen in exercise. If you've never exercised before, and you've been scared by all of this shit and coming out of the sky, chemtrails, meteors, government pronouncements, all of this kind of thing. And so you decided you're going to get yourself fit. How do you start? Well, the thing is, your whole body, if it's unfit, relies on a single muscle, and that is the heart muscle. And the heart muscle is really a weird one, because half of the thing really is a muscle, where there's the beat, 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 but the other part of it is really a sinus, where energy drains in from the free energy part of the materium. And so the sinusoidal rhythm, your two heart rate rhythms, the upper and the lower that they always quote to you, 172 over 91 or whatever it is that they're going to say to you. They always give you two numbers and they're separated. Well, one of them is the sinus part of the heart, and the other is the muscle part of the heart. And they have a different rhythm entirely. There you go, chemtrail flu. Anyway, so you need to know this. You can get a lot of information online if you wanted to go and read about it. Some people have written up this kind of an approach that we use in the dojos as a progressive something, like PACE. It's PACE. There's a couple of doctors out there that have done a good job of encapsulating it, and they tell you all about the reasons why to take this approach to exercise, and how really the good athletes have always done this, and they never really just never concentrated on the flow of it all, but the flow is extremely important. Also important is the circadian rhythm. You'll find that a lot of people fail at exercise because they get up and they try and exercise first thing in the morning, and they're not morning people, and their body's just not geared to it. Their body's got to get has a different approach and needs to get into the day in a different way. This is why so many people hate the PT or physical training in the military, because they always do that at the crack of dawn. Hell, they're out there racing the sun. They got to get out there and do their jumping jacks and stuff first thing in the morning. Now, I'm a morning person. I've always lived that way. I've always been keyed to reveille and taps, simply because I've lived on too many military bases, and so I've always been up at 4:30. And my dad for a long time was drill instructor, basic training kind of a guy. So we live to that schedule, and so it doesn't bother me. It's great. I get up and I exercise. I'll get this done here in a few minutes, and then I'll spend an hour or an hour and a half doing serious exercise while catching up on all the woo-woo online, and so on. But a lot of individuals are different body types, and especially if you're a Kapha or a Vata body type, and you may find that your circadian rhythms, you exercise best at around noon. And so to hell with the early morning stuff. Some people exercise best before they go to bed. I can't do that. It keeps me awake too long. In any event, though, if you get the lymph system moving through contraction of the muscles, now there's two different exercise sets that I've discovered that work really well in doing this. One of them are these little rebounder things, these little mini trampolines. By jumping up and down on those, you get all the muscles involved, and it really pops the lymph. It gives you that incredible feeling that you get from exercise very quickly, and it continues a long time, and that is the lymph system flowing. You can actually tell when you've reached this threshold and the lymph system is really moving, because you have a real good feeling of well-being in your physical body, and then you start noticing the other changes, the weight loss and so on. The same activity that can get the heart rate variability, that is the heart rate coming up and then slowing down, that same wave action, if you will, of how you approach getting your heart up and down, that's really good for the lymph system, because it, unlike trying to run continuously at a known pace or even a broken pace over a long distance, the up and down action of the wave approach to heart training is better for lymph system, because it doesn't attempt to maintain and keep a continuous pressure on the lymph system itself. Bear in mind, by the way, that the lymph system has a pressure in it, just as you have a blood pressure, you have a lymph system pressure. And in fact, a good Ayurvedic medicine guy, or a Taoist, what they call a TCM, traditional Chinese medicine fellow, will listen for the multiple pulses in your body and the multiple pressures in your body, not just the heart pulse, but also the lymph system pulse and the vital fluid pulse, etc. But the lymph system pulse is easy to learn to take yourself, and you can take it on the other side of your wrist from the little indentation where you would take your regular pulse. Now, if you're overweight, you won't be able to do this unless you can tap the bone of the protrusion just below the thumb and hear that noise and feel the contact of the finger to the bone. You're probably likely going to have too much flesh to be able to easily feel the lymph system unless you get out there and really exercise. Then you'll feel it, and you'll feel it in addition to your heart rate. But the heart rate thing, you can overcome limitations of sedentary lifestyle and being polluted by fizzy drinks and the horrors that are our diet, if you approach it in a little bit sort of an organized fashion and say, well, the very first muscle I have to train is my heart. And so my heart works best by getting it up to where it's a little bit scary in terms of its speed, and then letting it calm down. And getting it up until where it's a little bit scary in terms of speed, and then calm down. And by a little bit scary, I mean you feel it pounding in your chest a little bit and so on. You needn't really stress it out, but the idea is that you stress it out a little bit and then relax it, and stress it out a little bit and relax it. And we do this in an organized fashion in the dojo many times a week, but you can do it daily. One of the things I do is I train daily, so I continuously do that throughout the day. Is I will do my key exercises that will do just that, raise my heartbeat up and then allow it to wave down. So it keeps you fit a lot longer than any of the other mechanisms and methods that I've seen over the years. And I used to do long distance bicycle riding and as a training method, and it takes a long time. Bikes are really good. I like them. They're fun. It takes a while now for me to get my heart rate up that way. I'd have to do several good-sized hills and may have to spend 25 or 30 minutes on a bike. But with things like the kettlebells and the rebounders, I can get the heart rate up fairly quickly. I've got a 60-pound kettlebell here, and I can get it up past training effect for me is about 130, more or less 130 beats per minute. And I can get up to training effect in about 5 minutes with the 60-pound kettlebell. In the first minute, I'm up to about 118, so it works out quite well. The kettlebells are great, but they actually help your lymph system as well as the exercising the muscles, and perhaps are the best fat loss mechanism I've ever come across, simply because of the way that they work. But the better overall conditioning is for the lymph system is clearly the rebounders. And then one last piece of gear I have is a thing called an Om gym. It's a piece of cloth, basically, cleverly constructed by these people in Hawaii, I believe. And it's OMGYM. And you hang it, and it allows you to do advanced yoga off the ground, and you do it with no compression of the joints, and that's really great at my age. So I can do really stretchy curves and in the reverse curves in the spine, and put a lot of hanging effect, which is sort of the headstand kind of an effect from yoga, without putting any compression on the elements of the spine. And it's quite cool if you're into advanced yoga, and it allows some really good stretching. And again, it keeps you off the floor where the doggies don't mess with you. One of the problems around here, he's down doing his yoga. Let's go on over and lick parts of him and make him uncomfortable. Anyway, so the Om gym works really well. Again, it also does the lymph system because of the various different kinds of stretching. That's why yoga is really good for you, by the way, because the stretching, the compression of the muscles, acts as a pump on the lymph system in a way that running, for instance, only does it in a couple of muscle sets, but yoga, you can do it all over. And the problem in doing it in a couple of muscle sets, I've found that you can get the big bulgy thighs from specific kinds of exercise. I don't know, maybe sumo squats with dumbbells or something, and you'll actually end up with a pump in that area, but you'll find that other areas of the body, the lymph system is barely affected. It just really is a weird kind of an effect because of all the branches and so on. It's not a cohesive system the way that all blood eventually returns to the heart. The lymph system, it can just sort of hang about in your leg for a while, I guess, without really deciding to circulate around through the whole body. It just is it's an interesting system itself, and the best effect I've found has been to the rebounders. You bounce up, and then you get that effect of the lymph system popping on the way down, and the gravity involved, all the muscles, etc. All the muscles in the body are involved with it. So they're really kind of cool. They're noisy as hell unless you get the very expensive one with the bungee cords. So you have to be careful about that shoink, 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 shoink noise of jumping up and down all the time. Anyway, though, so chemtrails, weight loss is something I didn't really want to get off on, but heart rate variability is the key there, guys. Being an old fart and being fit, I know I've done a lot of this. Also, now today was the day we had the earthquake. 3-day variability, either way, based on the 27th as an earthquake center. This may relate to the sinkhole, because we're getting a lot of the sinkhole down in LA. We're getting a lot of the references now. We're pretty sure that the forecast for bad salts from the previous written report was indeed focused on the sinkhole and the salt domes down there. And we'd had a longer-term data set about a rupture that would cause dangerous gases that would cause people to flee, that appeared to be focused on the Gulf, and that was coincident with, that is to say, the data set was coincident with the data set from 2003 about the global coastal event. There was no direct linkage between the global coastal event data set and the data set that showed the people fleeing from the gas that would trap a bunch of people and animals in a valley and basically suffocate them because they weren't moving fast enough. There's no direct association between these two sets of data other than they were arising at the same time. There was no causal relationship or any of this. There did appear to be a causal relationship between the global coastal event and the Gulf oil spill, in that our data sets had always said that 19 months after they started the thing, we would get a series of earthquakes that would culminate in the shutting off of that spigot, if you will, in the Gulf, but it would be closed by an earthquake, not closed by anything that British Petroleum had done. So, in any event, though, the data sets are now pushing more towards an understanding of the sinkholes and the salt domes as being these bad salts, and it's going to be related to probably a methane release or some other gas that's associated with the sinkholes natively, as well as whatever it is that they've got stored there, and that the gas is going to be not the chemical construction that was put in there, in the sense that the data we've got suggests that the gas that comes out is heavier than air, as opposed to like butane, which would float on up or flash or explode or something. Here it looks like it's heavier than air and people have to flee from it. And it may be that this is related to the earthquakes. The sinkhole and the earthquake component are cross-linked in the last data that we'd seen. And I was running validation studies, and the only real sinkhole activity going on is the one in the Gulf. And our referential study here, where we actually validate the forecast language is showing up, keeps pointing more towards bad salts working out to be the sinkholes. So probably not a good thing, and something to pay attention to over these next few weeks, especially as we get into this period of March with the solar expulsions that'll be coming on out. Again, getting up to the solar expulsions here, the sun's going to get really crazy, and as part of this sun getting crazy, we're all being subjected to extra solar radiation, and that even might be something that chemtrails are intended to slow down. They act as a filter for sun radiation, because it certainly would work, and that would be a reason that you'd want to have it up there day after day after day after day, as opposed to their this supposed scientist's idea that they're using it as a part of the depopulation crap. Anyway, not that I dispute the depopulation crap and the Georgia Guidestones and all of that. Anyway, though, the solar radiation is certainly way up. We're getting strange reports out of the HARP stuff. All kinds of odd things are going on at the same time that we have humans all riled up. And so a lot of humans are riled up, I'm certain, as a result of their being affected at some level by the solar radiation. And this is probably what's the root cause of a lot of the contention that's going on around the planet at the moment. And we'll notice that the contention has now taken new turns in Europe, and that's really the place to pay attention to, as the riots and the governments collapsing in Eastern and Eastern Central Europe down into Southern Central Europe start to spread. So, the Bulgarian government resigned. Not that anybody would notice, other than, the people that used to work there. But even beyond that, we've got rioting throughout Slovenia, Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain. The place is certainly a hotbed of activity, and it's going to get even worse over these next few weeks as we go into more and more solar expulsions, which will put more and more pressure on all of us to vent. Now, speaking of venting, I'm going to actually I want to wrap this up and get to my own exercise and get some tea and stuff here. But there's some interesting occurrences up here in the Pacific Northwest relative to, rumors and more evidence of odd activity on the parts of the powers that be. So, for instance, I've heard rumors of a coming out of some local boys about how the government's actually planning on a very large earthquake. They think maybe this year that in the West is going to be an 8.0 or larger, that it's going to have a significant impact on bridges, overpasses, and buildings. And depending on which of the local boys I've talked to, they both went to the same meeting and they both heard the information, but one heard it one way and one heard it the other way. And the difference was that one guy heard that 80% of all the bridges and overpasses and buildings would be made unusable or destroyed, whereas the other guy heard the 80% of the bridges and overpasses, but he heard 20% of the buildings in the area would be made unusable or destroyed. Now, the government, in terms of the feds or whoever it is that's given the local boys, and it is the feds, it's coming out of the FEMA to the local disaster preparedness guys, they've got the idea that this is most likely sometime before the end of this year, and I guess they've been told that the window is more summer than not. So interesting there. Also, a fellow's been in contact with me and has pointed out some information about a really strange NGO, which is a non-governmental organization. And anytime anybody tells me they're part of an NGO, a non-governmental organization, I want to say, well, I have yet to see any of those. Those that I've investigated that claim to be so turn out to be so tied into government that they're government. They're simply not elected. That's all. They're still paid for it, etc. Anyway, there's this non-governmental organization that has got all kinds of weird contacts and contracts with the government of the feds of the Washington, D.C. kind to study a continent-wide natural disaster in North America. And they've got funding for it ahead of it. So they know it's coming, and they're going to study it. And they're going to study the after effects, and that's what this NGO is designed to do. It's just a really interesting little bit of information there that these guys are actually planning on studying some continent-wide natural disaster here in North America and its impacts. And primarily, by the way, the study, while it appears and is labeled as an ecological study, much of the data gathering appears to be focused on social breakdown and degradation and social contract breakdown as a result of the natural disaster. When you read into the literature there, it's just as a strange little thing. So again, yet another pointer that someone in the federal government thinks some major shit's going down, and they at least want to have a record of how it went down. An odd little bit of stuff there. So I guess that's about it for this Wujo. I've got to get out and get some boat work done, especially if these bridges are going to come down. Nobody's going to move around here unless they're doing it on the water. Too many hills and valleys. Anyway, immediacy data intelligence report, the last one for February, is up tomorrow. We're already processing. That's why I get up early on Wednesdays, is to fire off the processing part 53, I think, or 5311 or 5312. I've got all these processes numbered, these predicates, that actually gets us into the immediacy data for the interpretation tomorrow. And it's fairly bulgy. We've got looks like a fairly good set. So I'll get into that later today and then set it up. And we'll have the report out by probably 9 or 10 tomorrow. It's an interesting day. We've got a lot of medical appointments, and Kathy still has health issues that we're investigating. So it's been a bit of a strain, and some of our schedules are probably going to slip a bit. But we're still maintaining it. And we're getting a closer look on, I think, what's going to be the global coastal event as it appears in probably May. Our data first starts getting the data gap in March with real seriousness, and it's complete by May. So it takes basically about 80 some odd days from the time the gaps really start appearing, the holes, until it's a gap is fairly complete. So again, I think that the global coastal event, or those components of it, satellite damage or infrastructure damage at some level will bring down the internet to the point where we're not able to work, and that this apparently will occur again by May 20th. That's probably the best indicator we've got for time on this at this point. Hopefully we're wrong. If we get to June 1 and there has been none, it's like, retire and go sailing around and screw it. But there's too much going on for me to think that that's actually going to be allowed to occur. So anyway, immediacy data intelligence report tomorrow. Bye.